Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And before we move on to the meat of this episode, we would like to issue a series of corrections. It's the first time we've had to do this on the air. Last week, we were speaking about console online experiences, and we may have been a little off the mark with our facts.
Well, yeah, we based on my experience, I remembered the PS2 being the first system to go online, but one of my friends quickly corrected me online when he was listening to the episode and said, well, actually, the Dreamcast was the first system to go online, which also isn't necessarily true, but definitely in the States, it's like the first system I think that most people went online with.
Absolutely. And in talking about consoles and online experiences, you have a couple of different either starting lines or what you would really look at. Both of us remember the PS2 very fondly, or at least very distinctly, if only because of the fact that it came with you had to get the big hard disk for it. There was a lot of extra pieces that made it happen, and there were a couple of games. I mean, I was a huge EverQuest nerd at the time, implying that I'm not anymore. But the online adventures came out for PS2, Final Fantasy XI. But yeah, the Dreamcast, which came out a year before, had a built-in 56K modem. You didn't have to get anything external for it. Phantasy Star Online was one of the early games, and that was a huge deal at the time.
Yeah.
But also, if you want to keep going back further, because video game nerdery is a constant battle of actually.
Yeah, pretty much.
And definitely the thesis of this podcast is not to engage in that. But in the interest of hilarious trivia and factuality, you could even go all the way back to the original NES, the Famicom. Nintendo attempted several kinds of online gameplay, not in the sense as we think of it today, more of like how you think of the PlayStation Network, the Xbox Live Arcade, sort of getting games.
Yeah.
They had more success when they adapted it for the Super Famicom and made the Satellaview, which comes up every now and again when talking about different versions of games, because many popular franchises were adapted into sort of broadcast Satellaview online-only versions.
Yeah.
And and while those never made it to the States, a version of it that did, and if people need an artifact to wrap their heads around of what is this like, the Sega Channel, which as soon as we started talking about this before recording this episode, I was like, oh, I don't forget the Sega Channel. I never physically saw it in the flesh or in the plastic or anything, but I remember watching infomercials about this religiously. I didn't even own a Sega console at the time, and I thought it was just the coolest thing. It was so cool. You just get this cartridge, you go online, and you get games. It's so cool. And it worked for a time, and it actually was a pretty big success for Sega, but there was a lot of other things going on. And so those were the earlier online console applications that, you have varying ideas and, applications, I guess, to get to, all right, we have this console, we have this device, let's get it online, let's make an online experience. And I mean, if we want to go by a real gold standard starting line there, Xbox Live was kind of the first online experience that was akin to a PC online experience.
Right, and it was definitely one of the most mainstream ones. I mean, we mentioned all of these other things, but the reality is they were kind of... It's funny, Sega, the more you look at Sega's late console history, you realize they were definitely ahead of the game in so many places that had the Sega Dreamcast probably come out a year later with more features, or a year earlier, or if the timing was shifted just slightly, it might have been more of a success. But because of it, when it came out in that gap time, it was just old enough to fall behind and had some features that didn't become mainstream until much later.
And there was also some bad will here and there.
Right.
Sega, unfortunately, has its console history has fallen under a very dark onus. And unfortunately, some of their really kind of cool and forward-thinking or just interesting accomplishments get swept under the rug.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Granted, I was at a video game con in Parsippany, New Jersey last weekend, and looking at the Sega CD games that were on sale there, FMV gaming was not the future.
No, definitely not.
That whole segment of gaming history I would really like to talk about at some point, but that is not what we're here about. this episode, we wanted to continue the talk about online gaming, but I kind of wanted to use the Xbox as a pivot point into just the PC gaming experience, which has been more robust for longer, and as such has had a lot more interesting segments of history.
Yeah, I would say that PC gaming online and multiplayer for sure as the focus, because we talked about a lot of offline co-op and consoles of the early years and how it's faded as it's gone on. Whereas PC gaming, I feel like always had this online gaming experience, this multiplayer gaming. It was rare that you would do, I guess, what we can call same console on a PC. You can, and people did, but like for me, I think the earliest game I remember playing online against somebody else was Red Alert and StarCraft, which were both games that were designed to be played online. Battle.net's been around for a very long time, and this is a culture, I feel like, of gaming where, of course, there were LAN parties, but once the 56K modem became a popular thing and people were signing on to America Online and whatever else they were using to connect to the internet, it became very mainstream to play online with other people, to talk with other people online. And I personally, as a gamer, felt like the PC kind of led the way in that, and that things like Xbox Live and the PlayStation Network and whatever Nintendo is calling their online service these days are following in the footstep of what the PC started as far as an online gaming experience.
Yeah, and in a way, PCs had to figure out an online strategy quickly. When you play a couch co-op game, you can go to somebody's house and they have a single console with multiple controllers. You don't have to own the N64 in order to play Super Smash Brothers.
Right.
You can go to somebody else's house where they have an Xbox and you can all play Halo 2.
Right.
But if you wanted to play a multiplayer computer game, even the days of LAN parties, and boy did I have some LAN parties, you would have to bring your whole rig.
Yeah.
Which carries with it a definite sense of identity.
Yeah.
Because we could argue and talk about, like, console brand identity that has gone on. I mean, the Nintendo, Sega wars, and then when Sony entered the stage. But those are still singular entities. I'm not even talking about PC versus Mac.
Right.
That is a moot point, and I'm a lifelong Mac user, and it's fine. I admit it. For many, many, many years, the Mac was a non-starter as far as games go, and that was by design from them.
Right.
And that's fine, and that doesn't excuse anything, but that is.
Right.
Whatever, let's get that off the table. Gone.
We get it. You Macs can play games now. It's fine. Whatever.
We've
moved on.
We've moved on, clearly. But when you look at how you build your PC or how it is built, there are differences in your Dells, in your gateways, in your IBMs.
Compact
Presario, or this is just buying it off the shelf. If you got really serious, you don't know. Certainly don't know many people that have gone out and built themselves a Sega Genesis.
Yeah, that's
people have rebuilt pieces into other stuff and used emulation software, but nobody's gone out and built a Sega Genesis from scratch with parts they picked up here and there. I'm sure there's a few, but those are outliers. But the concept of going and building your own PC, building your own gaming PC, certainly, has been a mainstay of computer culture for decades.
Sure, yeah.
So you carry that level of pride and self-identity with not just a controller or just your skill at a game, but your entire hardware lifestyle with it.
For sure. I mean, there's a reason that there are a lot of jokes about the PC master race and this idea that you're creating an entity. I mean, growing up, I had boxed computers. I had compacts, I had Dells, and they all worked okay. And I was able to get, I think my earliest big online experiences when City of Heroes was going from beta to release, and I was playing it online on dial-up when my brother still lived at home, and our way to connect to the internet was his phone line, not the main phone line. Lots of yelling at me to get the hell off the internet.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, the cool thing about that is back then, it was most of the specs for games were kind of generalized. But as PC gaming grew and became more accessible, like I haven't owned a store-bought computer in God, over 10 years, if not longer. All of them have been custom builds, either designed by me or a friend, and then usually built by other friends, because I can replace parts, but building the whole thing from scratch is still not something I'm confident with.
It's a skill set.
But, this idea that gaming kind of evolved to, you could take turns with certain games like your Monopolies and whatever other board games that were on the computer.
I have many fond memories of my family crowded around our gateway playing You Don't Know Jack.
Exactly, which has also evolved. I mean, Jackbox now, which I didn't really know was a thing until recently, and we talked a little bit about it, I believe, last episode.
I think so.
Is they've created these mini games within this umbrella of You Don't Know Jack, which are available on Steam, on all consoles, and integrated the smartphone into it, which is brilliant. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think the first genre of gaming I really associate with PC online gaming are two main games, and then we'll get to a third, I think, that has become the dominant. But it's MMOs and real-time strategy games. There are tons of other games to play online, especially now with Steam as a distributor, and you can get fighting games and all sorts of other games that you can play online with ease, first-person shooters. But I think for me, those two kind of defined PC gaming. Shooters I very much associated with consoles, even though that's not the experience for a lot of other people. I recognize that, and I played it as well, but back in the Counter-Strike years, and Jedi Knight Outcast. These are games that were competitive online shooters or shooter equivalents that people defined PC gaming by.
Yeah, I would say real-time strategy and actually shooters were kind of my first foray into online. I guess we'll go back to the Mac thing for a moment because that's what I grew up with. My first computer was a Macintosh Performa 6200 CD. Look it up, laugh. Came out in '94. Was at a time when a CD drive was a selling point.
Right, exactly.
But my real gaming on a computer was when my brother and I both owned iMacs. Like the first generation, big, colorful,
God.
Jeff Goldblum commercial. Like that era of Apple computer. He had a blue one, I had a purple one, had a handle on it. Again, even when it's just like freaking translucent cases.
Right.
There is a sense of identity here.
Sure.
And we had a little LAN box, a network hub between our rooms. We ran network cable and we were able to game together.
Right.
And my brother and I played a lot of Blizzard games.
Sure, of course.
My brother loved Warcraft and Warcraft 2.
How could you
And I liked doing whatever my brother did. And I am still, to this day, terrible at real-time strategy games. I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it and went into it, I would never be, I would never break 100 actions per minute or anything. That's even being ambitious. But I'm sure I could sit down and do it. But my memories of real-time strategy is just my brother is kicking my ass.
Yeah.
And Unreal Tournament.
Oh, Unreal Tournament. Yeah.
That was the big one for us.
My favorite thing about Unreal Tournament is I got into it very late. And the modding community, it was the first time I really learned about modding community. The bots you could have, the skins you could have for your character, the weapon sets. Like, I remember playing that game. I think it was in the much later years, back when, internet cafes were a really big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Playing a Futurama modded Unreal Tournament where you were Fry and Bender and you were fighting all of the other cast members, and it had, of course, sound bites and you could fire nibbler guns, and it was ridiculous.
Indeed.
But yeah, no, it's funny for me. Online gaming was very solitary, or rather PC gaming was very solitary until I started doing online gaming. But things like, for me, it was StarCraft. I loved Warcraft, but StarCraft was the game that really got me into online multiplayer.
Funny story. I played a lot of Warcraft. I was that kid who, the Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, because we got the battle chest, which also came with Beyond the Dark Portal, the expansion. I read the instruction manuals of those things as bathroom reading. I probably still know a lot of the lore pretty well.
Yeah.
If I were to be quizzed. But I looked at it, and it's like, great franchises from Blizzard, and it said on the back, Diablo, StarCraft. I thought they had misspelled Warcraft, and I had no idea that there was this franchise called StarCraft until I was probably about 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
I'm not ashamed of this. It's why I'm telling you. Please be gentle with this information.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that also I knew StarCraft as a modding community as well at first, but like good friends of mine were very into it, and so I would play it a lot. And I got very good with the Zerg to the fact that I could play pretty competitively pretty well until I tried going online and playing with random people.
Yeah.
Me and my friend Brian Vislaki, who's a listener of the show, used to play it a lot, and he had a friend named David Yan, I believe his name was. And I would talk to him about why we always played on the same team, the three of us. He's like, oh, because you don't want to play against him. And we did. I think it was one time we played 3-on-1, me, Brian, and his sister against David, and he wiped the floor with all of us. It was astonishing.
There's always that friend.
Right.
Like, people have their genre. It's like, don't challenge them in their house.
Exactly. But the thing about real-time strategy that I liked back then is that this kind of way to think and dissect a battlefield that just didn't work on console. Now, we briefly mentioned that there were some things about PC online gaming that didn't work in consoles. If you had a Nintendo 64, you might recall that they made StarCraft 64. Blizzard's attempt at a console game gone very, very wrong.
Oh, yes. Especially because at that point, there was a lot of push. I mean, I think that generation, the PS1, Sega Saturn, and 64 generation, was when they really started trying to go... like, they took PCs in one hand and they took consoles in the other and just did one of those, like, love each other, now kiss, come on!
Exactly.
And that's where you get a lot of awkward efforts. It's much like doing that with a couple of 12-year-olds, you know. Something's gonna happen. It may not be what you want.
And so I remember hating StarCraft on the N64, even though I loved it on the PC. And I was like, well, I'm never playing a real-time strategy game on the console anymore. I mean, since then, they've, of course, grown quite a bit. And there are plenty of fun real-time strategy games that have come out on console. For all of its bashing, I actually liked Halo Wars on the Xbox. I thought it was a decent game.
I never gave it much time. I've never been a fan of the Halo franchise.
That's fair.
I did plenty of online matches and like multiplayer matches with friends. I remember once going to my friend Chris Hollenbeck's house, and we had 2 Xboxes, 2 TVs, 8 people playing. This was also around when Red vs. Blue was... We were waiting for the second season to start. This is how long ago that was. There was only 1 season of Red vs. Blue. And I mostly got into the game because I liked the comedy of Rooster Teeth so much.
Sure.
And man, I gave that franchise a lot more leeway than I would give any other shooter franchise.
That's true.
For that very reason. So I unfortunately... Yeah, I know the online opinion of Halo Wars, but yeah. I guess hey, there's something about it.
There was something about it, but the reality, going back to online PC gaming, I think that what really expanded my knowledge of PC gaming quite a bit until Steam became a mainstream thing was MMOs, which, you know, EverQuest is I believe one of the oldest MMOs in existence, and there have been many to rise and fall since. But for me, growing up a comic book fan, there was a game called City of Heroes that was coming out that was create your own superhero and live in the superhero world. It's a game I probably miss more than any other MMO. I still say one of the best character creation systems in the history of gaming.
I don't need to go online. Yeah. I just want that character creator in my life.
Right.
I never owned City of Heroes, but several of my friends in college did, and the amount of characters I made, I didn't get very far in the game.
Yeah.
I didn't care. I had the best time just making up superheroes. It was every schoolyard discussion, school bus arguing back and forth, BS you made up in your head, come to life on screen. It was, you could have that, and it's basically like Mario Maker kind of thing. You know, just give us the tools, and you don't even need to give us much in the way of playing it out. Just like, and look at this thing I have.
Yeah.
I can make a dance.
Right, exactly.
No, so I don't have the wealth of experience of it that you do, but oh my god, no, that was... I don't know if a game will ever have a better character creation. For those who didn't play it, you could define so many parts of how your character was built. It was comic book proportions.
Right.
So you could be rail thin all the way up to, you know, you didn't have like big. You had hulking.
Yeah.
You could build the Hulk.
Yeah.
Like people of that size. You were able to customize patterns and colors. You gave them catchphrases.
Yep.
Battle cries that you would have. I remember my friend Greg making the biggest, largest character model he could make.
Yeah.
And made him a ninja.
Uh-huh.
Just for irony's sake. I think he called him the Big Dot.
The Big Dot.
And he made his battle cry, wait up, guys! And we thought that was the funniest thing, and it's like all those little touches.
But I think that MMO games, for sure, and for me it was starting with Steve Heroes, are what kind of opened my eyes to what online PC gaming could be. Because it's funny that I felt like there was more community, and we talked about this last 2 weeks ago a little bit, that local co-op had this sense of community, whereas online gaming I felt was a little more isolating. That is less true with, I feel, MMOs, and the spiritual successor to MMO games, which I feel are MOBAs. The games like Dota and Dota 2 and League of Legends and Heroes of the Storm, whatever other games I'm forgetting that are just like it, Smite, these games took this idea of controlling a character that you created. Instead, you're a summoner to bring characters to this world, and you make them fight. It's like making them kiss, but you're making them fight.
But it also is a very honest evolution of what was before, because we were talking about early memories of online PC gaming being real-time strategies.
Mm-hmm.
In much the same way as Gary Gygax adapted Chainmail from the large war game down to the solo character to make Dungeons and Dragons, the MMO, while it evolved from multi-user dungeons and chat rooms and everything else, the concept of it and the way that it played out once you got into the 3D realm and you had things like Ultima Online, EverQuest, Asheron's Call, Dark Age of Camelot, you had that same idea of the big open crazy world, but down to controlling the small character, and you are part of a larger community that is those armies.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and what's really interesting also about MMOs versus MOBAs, as far as where my online gaming lives, is, for me, I played most MMOs to do, co-op and non-PvP. I didn't want to do player versus player battleground matches. It was just not a thing I was interested in.
Right.
The best example would be World of Warcraft, which is known for its PvP being as in-depth as its PvE. Mm-hmm. I was interested in the PvE. I wanted to do the lore. I wanted to explore the story. I wanted to interact with the characters. But then games like Dota and Dota 2 and Heroes of the Storm and League of Legends come along, and now there is no PvE. I mean, there's usually you can verse AI, but for the most part, it's only player versus player. That I became interested in because it was battleground mentality. It was the same as like doing online shooters, but to me, it was a mix of online shooter combat along with real-time strategy fused together that made the online competitiveness more interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of MMOs in the early days, they weren't sure how PvP was going to play out. If you want to look at some very quaint articles, look up, it's stuff from around that time, like around 2000, and look up player versus player and player killing.
Yeah.
And this whole idea, we weren't sure. Like, we as a community weren't sure how this would play out, what this would mean, with griefers and with everything else and what have you. And I think it took a few years of World of Warcraft, I want to say, for, I don't want to give World of Warcraft all the credit there, but it was just it was the right time.
Yeah.
And a lot of other elements came together where it was just oh yeah, we can have just as robust of a player versus player experience, and that at the same time as Warcraft 3 giving us, giving birth to Dota.
Right.
And, all of these things kind of feeding together.
Yeah.
To create a more streamlined approach, because massively multiplayer online role-playing games, you are a singular character, a singular entity within a large, finger quotes, breathing world.
Right.
And how you go about that is part of the point, part of the allure. There are people who have leveled to max level in World of Warcraft, never fighting anybody.
Right, exactly.
You can choose to do that, and I personally find that refreshing and fascinating. I love playing characters like that.
Sure.
But there are people who also go to the max level so they can start raiding.
Right.
And this is another piece of that, like, streamlined experience. Okay, we know what PvP can be, and people are doing this, and that's happening, and some people just want to go on raids. All right, here's your lane. Literally, here is your lane. Go to town.
Right. Well, yeah, and that can make or break a game. I mean, with the thing I think that defines cooperative versus, as it were, PvP, is with player versus player content, it kind of never ends. I mean, games like Heroes of the Storm now, which I play the most as far as MOBAs go, they're constantly releasing new heroes, new game mechanics, additional stages, so on and so forth. New costumes, more stick to win and unlock and whatever.
The Team Fortress 2 model.
Right. Which is great. But then you also have games like The Old Republic, which was a Star Wars online MMO that was created by BioWare, who I thought could do no wrong. And I loved the first the first two Knights of the Old Republic games, and this was supposed to be a follow-up in that universe, but allowed you to create your own Star Wars character, which was great in theory. The problem was they had great storytelling, they had great questing, and a lot of fun game mechanics, but when you got to the end game, there wasn't much in the way of rating content, and people kind of hit a wall. And the thing is, it's not easy to keep people engaged with that kind of stuff. Going back to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago with local co-op, is you don't need to keep updating that. In theory, Super Mario Brothers 1 will always be fun when you play it with somebody else and take turns.
Yeah.
You don't need to add anything to that. You can always go back to it.
If you need to, you can turn it into a drinking game or a weird bet or just whatever handicaps you want to create to liven up the experience.
But at its core, the game experience loops well.
Yes.
With something like an MMO, the growth and or a MOBA where you have levels and you unlock stuff, there needs to be a goal, there needs to be rewards, there needs to be things that you unlock. The story itself, it will eventually not be enough.
And people will create their own goals. That's one of the interesting things. One sector of MMOs that we have been ignoring this entire episode, not pointedly or anything, but now I'm getting to it, EVE Online, which is a game that is certainly not about endgame rating content.
No.
That is a game where you are... Oh my God, people have created financial empires within the confines of that game. Was that their intent? I'm actually not sure anymore.
Yeah.
And you can't necessarily do something like that in like World of Warcraft. Although a favorite story of mine that I love to go back to as far as old lawless days of online multiplayer, whatever. This is a story about from EverQuest. Nowadays in EverQuest, because the servers are still active, EverQuest 1 is still going on. If you want to sell a whole bunch of items, a great way to do it is there are zones you can go into. I mean, this was what was going on the last time I checked. It may have changed. You go into like the bazaar and you get these bags, like specialty merchant pouches, so no weight reduction, or like 100% weight reduction, no weight, so you can run around with all the crazy stuff, tons of slots. You set yourself up in a spot. You set prices and set yourself to merchant. Go have a sandwich. go to dinner. Go dancing. I don't know. Do whatever you want. Come back. People can like treat you as if you were an NPC and search your prices and whatnot. But they didn't do that until about the 5th expansion. Before that, everything was barter. Everything was people talking to each other. So my friend Mike was playing a paladin and had gotten a decently high level sword from a friend of ours. Just, like, I don't need this. Here you go. Whatever. Have fun.
Sure.
Now, for those who think in World of Warcraft terms, instead of gold, the highest was platinum.
Right.
And it was about 50 platinum. That was about how much that sword was worth. Whereas like a full set of like high level gear would be probably like 10,000 platinum. I'll be damned if he didn't turn that sword into a full set of high-level armor by going to one of the zones that had been set off as like, not a lot of hunting goes on here, this is a nice spot, there's a banking zone, people of all factions can show up, and let's spam the channel with auctions, everybody's talking, everybody, like, it is really, you have to follow the chat window, you had to like, send direct messages to people, send them tells like, all right, how much is that, what can you offer for it, and like, everybody kind of playing the shell game over who's willing to pay what or part with this and that. And he caught a couple people just like, I'm giving this away, I'll take it. And just within an afternoon, turned that sword into a full suit of armor. Now, did he gain any experience? No. Did he get any closer to endgame content? No. Did we have a great time? You bet.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's great that Heroes of the Storm and League of Legends and those games exist because there's a lot of gameplay experiences where you need that very direct kind of endgame content. But sometimes you just want to try a concept, or sometimes you find your own fun in a weird way.
Sure.
Which I guess brings me to Diablo.
So Diablo, I mean, Diablo 3, the newest version, has some things that remind me quite well of the first two versions of it, but it's also kind of taken on a life of its own. Now that it has seasons and it has ways to unlock specialty gear, and they've added classes. The thing about Diablo is it kind of brought me back to cooperative multiplayer on PC, because Diablo 2, what the hell is the expansion called for Diablo 2?
Lord of Destruction.
Lord of Destruction. Was one of the most played multiplayer games I think I ever played. I played so many different versions of the Druid constantly. My favorite being my werewolf Druid, where he could turn into a werewolf, he had wolves, and he had like nature spells.
I was always a big fan of necromancers, and my favorite builds are always just a couple of skeletons and a lot of corpse explosion.
Yep, that seems to be people's strategy still with the newest version of the necromancer.
I know it's a very common strategy for it, but I tell you, you get into a crowd, it's very effective, and it is incredibly satisfying. Just a couple of clicks and everything explodes. My second favorite is a paladin that's just all lightning focused. Then again, you're walking around and you are the oncoming storm.
That's true. But games like Diablo, had this immersive story that you would play through several times. But then after that, it was, let's just go ransack dungeons, get better gear, and keep playing over and over.
You will not stay a while and listen. No. You will get to level 90 as soon as you can. And I would say probably, aside from EverQuest and World of Warcraft, the most commonly LANed game amongst my friends, where we would literally cart our computers and everything else, was Diablo 2. It was, one of us would take a high-level character and like kind of twink up the others, or we'd all start at level 1 and just kind of, we'd do Tristram runs, we would do all of that, and just see how far we could go in the span of an evening, eating terrible food and just shouting from around the kitchen and other part of the, and just scattered around my house.
Right.
Or Mike's house, or whomever else's, and that was... It's a wonderful experience, and it's one that can still be had.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about PC gaming versus other local co-op is that, well, yes, a LAN party, for the most part, nowadays, you would probably have a LAN party, but you'd realistically all be online. You would be LAN connected to each other. You would be on the internet.
You'd be on Wi-Fi, and a lot of people would have laptops. Not everybody.
But the thing that I really like about PC gaming now as it's come is because a system like Steam exists and Origin and these other, Blizzard's gotten a lot more expansive. There are publishers who want to release an online gaming experience that's more unique. The idea that on Steam you could buy ToeJam and Earl 1 or 2 and play them online with somebody else, which is, back in the day, you couldn't. Same with some of the later Sonic games that had versus gameplay you could play together online instead of before with those games. It's interesting that there seems to be, while consoles still seem to be fairly divided on their their primary products. Nintendo will always have Mario, Xbox will always have Halo, PlayStation will always have the Uncharted series and whatever else they're claiming to be their exclusives. PCs tend to have the most cross-pollination for multiplayer. That there's no one kind of gaming experience that defines it. Whereas with PC, with consoles, I feel like MMOs, while they exist on console, and you can play Destiny 1 or 2 and the newer Final Fantasy MMOs on console, there will always be this kind of, for me anyway, this leaning towards PC for that experience. Like Destiny 2, I was a big fan of the first Destiny game, though I got into it very late on PlayStation 4. And I really enjoyed it, but now that the sequel's coming out, though later than the console version, is coming out on PC and being distributed by Activision and Blizzard, I'm more excited to get it on PC because I like that sense of community and interaction being equated with PC for online gaming. I will always choose your Mario Karts, your Street Fighters, any game that I feel like Smash Brothers, these games that are defined by the local co-op will always be a console game for me.
And while you get a lot of interesting indie games nowadays that kind of, now that it's a lot easier to connect a console controller to PC, the Bluetooth of PlayStation controllers connects to PCs pretty easily, Xbox as well.
Yep.
You're able to deliver something resembling a console experience like that. But again, a singular PC doesn't quite deliver the same couch co-op experience. You still need separate rigs in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
And something that I'm kind of keep coming back to in this while we're talking about this is that whereas it used to be your sense of identity for PC gaming, because PC gaming, even more than console gaming, and believe me, console gaming has a lot of stake in its own identity and the people who play it even more, however real, inflated, or not.
Right.
That just is what happens. PC gaming has a far deeper stake because of so much isolation. If you don't make an effort to connect, there's isolation.
Right.
And so singular identity is important. So whereas it was like, what you're bringing to the LAN party, you're not exactly comparing specs if you're playing over Steam or anything like that.
Right.
You might be, but not everybody is. But where that then shows up is all of those cosmetic awards.
Yeah.
The hats that you can get, the robes, the ribbons, the sparkles, the particle effects, the things that say how long you've been playing, what pre-order you did, what achievement you've had, what piece. And doesn't matter what stripe, number of years, or whatever. If you play video games with any regularity, there is a definite sense of, I want people to see my accomplishments.
Yes.
So, whereas we can't show off our PCs nearly as much in our friend's basement, we can sure show our PC gaming through our avatar.
For sure. And I think that achievements is a whole separate conversation, but there's definitely this sense of attachment of accomplishment to PC gaming, awards won, avatars, and all of that. Whereas there's some of that with consoles as well, but it kind of went on a quick swing. With console multiplayer, the idea of having an avatar, your me or your Xbox Live avatar or your profile picture on PlayStation, and unlocking achievements on Xbox and PlayStation, there seems to be a kind of leveling out of that. Whereas PC, I think it just gets bigger and bigger. This idea of why we keep coming back to why World of Warcraft is one of the biggest MMOs of all time. At this point, it's eclipsed EverQuest. There are others that are popular, but World of Warcraft is still the most commonly known and the largest and continuing to still grow.
Oh, yeah. EverQuest got it out there. World of Warcraft has kept it going. World of Warcraft, cemented it.
Yeah. They still come out with consistent expansions. They still add classes, races, all of that. But all of that, it's changed now. I feel like a lot of the online experience for MMOs after each expansion is kind of a return to zero. They allow you to buy a max level character. You can buy certain gear. You can purchase certain experiences because it stopped being about who could get where and more about inclusivity, which, as someone who didn't have as much time to play MMOs as others, I don't mind. But I know a lot of PC online gamers and multiplayer gamers felt a little shafted because all of that work you put into it kind of disappears because other people can just buy the experience.
Oh, yeah. And there again, like we were saying before, each game you kind of find the goal, and if you have it very open sandbox in some ways, the goal becomes muddied. I definitely remember, and I think I spoke about this in a much earlier episode, the idea of certainly when EverQuest first came out, there were no maps.
Yeah.
It was all 56K modem, so you couldn't sit there with like an FAQ open on another computer or check your phone or anything else. It was you versus the environment.
Yeah.
And there was so much terror and so much like exploration and unknown and unknowable.
Yeah.
You would draw maps yourself. I hadn't done that since in ages.
Right.
And nowadays the environment doesn't necessarily call for that or need that anymore. And so I feel like MMOs still come out nowadays, but a lot of them are sort of like freemium.
Yeah.
And you can't quite get the same player base, much the same way as console gaming is sort of awkwarding out of heavy emphasis on achievements.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of PC gaming is awkwarding out of the classic MMO experience, aside from Warcraft.
Yeah. And there are other games that have come and gone that try to capture what that experience was. But I think when we boil down PC online gaming, and of course, no matter how much we boil it down, PC gaming is going to be more based on your own personal experience. I think ultimately there's this line between a solo experience and a multiplayer experience, whether it's a multiplayer game or not. This idea that playing World of Warcraft can be a single player experience. You can play through the whole story by yourself, never do dungeons with anybody, and you exist in this world where other people do, but you don't have to interact, or you completely immerse yourself and interact with everything, and engage in everything.
Or you role play.
Yeah.
That used to be a big thing. There used to be like actually playing in character. There were servers based around role play. That is a goal within itself. And at the end of it all, whether it's City of Heroes, World of Warcraft, EverQuest, Unreal, League of Legends, EVE Online, Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, because honestly, like a lot of online gaming nowadays has finally caught up with collectible card games. There's been, I remember the days of Apprentice, online Magic the Gathering stuff, and like that's caught up too. A lot of it just comes down to personal.
Yeah.
Like between your computer, your preferred genre, your little flair of how your avatar is, how you present yourself. You don't have to worry about you didn't have to worry about handles as much in the earlier days of console multiplayer gaming, and so creating a profile kind of has that cute little thing. But your gamer tag, that's a very personal thing as far as PC goes. I think that that exists in console, but it's very strong for PC.
Sure.
And all of those things. If you want to get really hokey about it, PC stands for personal computer.
Right.
So it is the thing that I feel separates PC multiplayer from console multiplayer is how very singular it is.
Mm-hmm.
And we said before that PCs kind of reach out by necessity.
Yeah.
The internet was so computers could talk to each other. First about Star Trek and porn. And God love it. Without stuff like that, we wouldn't be where we are today.
True. The reason the internet is the way it is today is probably because of porn.
Yeah.
I would have to say hard.
Listen, there's some jokes about it, but sometimes the porn industry is on the forefront of where technology is going.
It has decided every kind of media shift. Blu-ray versus HD, DVD. Porn picked Blu-ray. Blu-ray won out. Same with VHS and Beta. Beta Max.
Beta Max. I think Beta Max.
Beta Max.
Correct
me online if I'm wrong.
I only know that because of Monty Python's Meaning of Life.
Yes.
You could find it on VHS, Betamax, or Super 8. I don't even know what Super 8 is. I'll look it up on Wikipedia later. But yeah, it's man, that's a whole nother episode.
That is a whole other episode.
But no, but yeah, it's a very interesting sort of dichotomy.
Yeah. I would agree. I think that, and everyone's going to have their different experiences about online gaming. We spoke at length last episode about couch co-op and being in the same room. And I think that the more I game and evolve how I game, it defines how I want my multiplayer and single player experience to be. playing a competitive shooter, for example, I've been playing a lot of Splatoon 2, and I'm playing online with some friends, but for the most part, I'm playing with just randos online. And I find myself, because it's, and I talked a little bit about this last time, because it favors being able to interact without having to speak. I can listen to a podcast, I can have a TV show on in the background. Whereas there's some online PC gaming, like your MMOs or stuff, where I'd rather be talking to other people while I'm playing. But also, I've been talking a lot about Here's the Storm, that also I'll play some competitive matches while listening to a podcast or something. I think as the multiplayer experience evolves and how much you want to interact with those other players besides playing with them will determine how gaming continues to grow in a multiplayer space.
Yeah.
I think also the types of games will change that too. As we return to retro stuff, will we see a return to couch co-op and turn-based gameplay like your Mario Brothers, where you take turns instead of playing at the same time? It's hard to say, but I know that for me, if I had to pick a game that really defined my online PC experience, it would be Diablo 2 Lords of Destruction. I think, and if I had to pick a favorite online game of the heyday, it would be that. Because it had such variety. It had, the story never got old because the dungeons were always different. They were always randomized. They always changed. And I loved playing those characters. And even though you only had three skill trees with each character, I think it was three.
Yes, it was 3.
There was such a variety of things you could do. Like, there was nowhere where it said in-game, to build a werewolf druid, here are the things you pick.
Well,
that was my narrative I created with the druid. I had wolves, I was a werewolf, I had nature spells. That's my werewolf druid.
Yeah, and especially after I think it was version 1.10 update where they put in synergies.
Yeah.
That then made skills that you would have never considered putting a point into, you now put 10, 20 points into it because it does such boost to what you exactly want to be doing in the first place. You know, you put a point in this to get it, then you put all these points into the other stuff. So that skill you have 1 point in has so many boosts to it because all those synergy bonuses are way better than putting more points into it. And you have it, so you get skill bonuses from items anyway, and the item sets you could build and the things that dropped. So by the way, my choice as well is Diablo 2, Lords of Destruction. It's hilarious. Druid is really the only character I haven't done any exploring on.
That's funny. It's funny that we settle on the same game as a favorite online game and it still had a very different experience. But it's funny because I mostly only play Druid. I would play Barbarian from time to time and Crusader, but for the most part, that was the character I liked playing the most.
Yeah. I recently, about a year ago, I want to say, they did this update to Diablo 2, so it was easier to play on modern computers. So I was finally able to play Diablo 2 again on my Mac, and so I kind of just built several characters, and I'm trying out ridiculous concepts I never would have had, and there's such a wealth of knowledge online to work with. So I've. Again, I think I need to build a druid. I haven't tried it. And I'm like, I want to explore all of them again. I want to remember what I love about this. I'm finally going to make a fire sorceress because I just really like lightning. I don't know.
How can you not?
I don't know what it is, but as an element in video games, I love lightning. It's just fun to do. It usually attracts to whatever the enemy is, or even if it's random. I enjoy randomized aspects. And in Diablo, I love you can maximize everything, and it's like, how much damage does lightning bolt do? Well, anywhere from 1 damage to 12,782 damage. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that.
So I think that in conclusion, it's easy to say that while consoles are somewhat of a package deal, because there's a level of customability to PC gaming and the like, and Mac gaming, whatever gaming we're talking about, that's non-console gaming, it's going to be a different experience from person to person. I mean, we always like to ask the audience what your favorite gaming experience is, and I'd be curious, because I know some of our listeners pretty well, what you would consider the best online gaming experience you've had on a PC or a Mac, if that's what you use, or what kind of defined it for you. Like I said, Blizzard is one of those companies that have been there since the beginning for me, and I've kind of come full circle to relying on them a lot as far as PC gaming goes. And so I'm curious what your experience would be, loyal listener, as far as what PC games defined online gaming for you. I mean, I know there's a whole segment of people who lived and died by Counter-Strike. And I loved Counter-Strike, mostly in those internet cafes because you could play with friends and yell across the room. It was a fun experience, and it was more in line with couch co-op.
Yeah, it's the closest we got to couch co-op.
And so I'm curious from that side of it, if you're a big first-person shooter fan, what was the beginning for you? Because for me, like I said in the last episode, first-person shooters are rooted for me in console gaming, even though that's not the case for a lot of people. But because I started with GoldenEye as the first big first-person shooter I played, it's very rooted to that. Whereas that's not the case for other people. You mentioning Unreal and us mentioning Counter-Strike, that's where some people began with that genre.
Oh, yeah. And I remember playing a lot of Star Wars Battlefront at my local internet cafe. Shout out to Cyber Connection. Rest in peace. And, yeah, no, absolutely. Where you get started sort of defines your experience. It's your starting point, and everything is relative to that. And so that's why a lot of PC gaming's developments have affected console and vice versa, and why we're in the genres and place that we are now as a community, let alone individually. And I'm excited to see where it goes from here. As the lines sort of blur between PC and console, as they've been doing for the last 4 console generations, they're never going to fully become indistinguishable.
Right.
Maybe Microsoft and Xbox, but that's because it's Microsoft and they kind of have all those cards. But even still, it'll maintain singular experiences, and I'm interested to see kind of, because what I expect to happen, this is my speculation, things will kind of come together a little bit, and then little like specific market shares will be established.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, but I'd love to hear, we both would love to hear what everybody's PC online gaming experiences were. What's your history? What's your favorite? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that as far as moving into the future, games like Destiny 2, which are cross-platform, and Monster Hunter World, which is coming out, which is going to be, at this point, cross-platform with Xbox, PlayStation, and the PC. No mention of if the Switch is going to be included in that yet. But these are the kinds of games that will continue to push forward and blend together PC and console gaming. And so, yeah, I'm curious what the future will hold for that, because these are very specific games that are making this kind of crossover.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to see where it goes. But please, of course, as always, let us know what you think somewhere on the internet. Please rate and review us on your podcasting app of choice. We're in the process of getting Fun and Games added to Spotify, because they started hosting podcasts recently as well. But please, of course, interact with us somewhere online. We'd love to hear from you guys as always.
We love to continue the conversation in any way we can. It's always a delight. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.